Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
The following is independently produced programming. The views and opinions expressed are those of the producers and do not reflect the views and opinions of Falls Area Community Television, our staff, or board of directors.
Secrets in the shadows, lost and found. Truth in every echo, loud and clear. Keep on with the long road, no more fear. In the halls of power, whispers grow. Every secret crack beneath the undertone. Honor stories hidden in the glass. On this long road, in the truth we trust.
Welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Kris Roberts. And today, April 15th, is tax day. For all the people that owe money, today was probably the day they filed. For all the people that were getting money back, they probably filed a heck of a lot earlier, maybe even the end of January, no later than the beginning of February. And so right now, we're going in, and they're talking about how the big, beautiful bill is helping everybody, and that the average tax return is up this year. So the average tax return so far this year is $3,521. Okay, part of it is for if you have children and some of the child deductions. Part of it, if you're in Social Security, you're a senior, you're 65 and older, you're collecting Social Security. You have that $6,000 each tax deduction. And so if you fell in the category, and that's $12,000, and if you and your significant other, being politically correct, we're in the 10% bracket, you're going to get $1,200 extra back. But again, it's how we play with numbers. And it's saying, wow, the big, beautiful bill, as a result of it, tax returns, tax rebate checks are up 11%. Wow, you go 11% seems like a lot. Well, 11% means you're getting $360 on an average more than last year. $360. That comes out to maybe $1 a day over the course of the year. Well, what is $1 going to do? Well, it seems that these tax returns are really not helping a lot of people, because a lot of people usually use these tax returns to pay down your credit cards and things. Well, in the month of March, our first warm month, the usage of credit card was up 4.3%, one of the highest percent increase in the last couple of years. And we all know that if you have a vehicle, basically in the month of March, we spent an average of 16.4% extra on the cost of gasoline compared to February. 16.4%, and for some people, by the end of May, that $360 is going to be all gone to the as a result of the price of gasoline. And for the people who could afford to go out to eat, you probably noticed that the month over month the prices have gone up. the cost of going out to eat in the month of March increased 4.3%. Wow. And so those are just some of the things that are going. But getting back to the taxes, people argue, well, half the people in the United States don't pay taxes. Other people say, yes, they pay taxes. And it comes down to, is Social Security and Medicare taxes, or are they buying a retirement plan? Are they buying a medical plan? What is the difference from someone going out and buy a retirement plan than someone putting money into Social Security? Me personally, I don't view Social Security as a tax. It's a retirement investment. I don't view Medicaid care money as a tax. It's buying health insurance when you get 65 and basically, or you get disabled. Basically, you know what? How many people have health insurance after they quit their job, lose their job, etc.? Okay. For a while, Social Security and Medicaid, medical, was standalone. But because there was a lot of money there and a lot of surplus, they were combined into the federal budget, so it made the budget look really good. Again, but it was just playing with numbers. This is for fiscal year 24. It takes a while for the federal government to get everything in order and get closed out. The number one expense for the federal government at $1.46 billion, $1.461 billion is actually basically $1.4 trillion, because people are saying, oh yeah, 1.461 billion. But 1.461 billion is 1.461 trillion. That's the biggest expense that the federal budget has to pay. And as we get later, that is a mandatory payment they have to pay. So out of the budget, what we're saying is $1.5 trillion has to be paid no matter what. Then the Social Security has two programs: the old age and survivor insurance and disability insurance. Okay, there's whatever numbers you look at, there's between 8 to 10 million people who are disabled in the United States. And we go back and forth, it's really tough to get a real accurate number on how many are collecting Social Security, disability, others. And for example, there's a number of veterans that I know who collect at 100% or maybe 70 or 80% from the VA, but at the same time collect money from Social Security disability. So neither one affects it, but if you have 100% from the VA, your chances of getting Social Security disability increases pretty drastically. But it's not always the other way around, because what you have for Social Security disability may have nothing to do with military services. The number two, 991 billion, basically 1 trillion. The health function includes most direct healthcare services funded by the federal government other than Medicare. Health benefits for federal employees and certain retirees, and treatment, assessment, and prevention of health-related issues in the United States. Examples include Medicaid, the Children Health Program, things I've known as CHIPS, and activities carried out by the National Institute of Health, Center for Disease Control, and the Food and Drug Administration. So, like when people see health, oh yeah, that must be talking about Medicare. And no, it's all these other. Who would know that lumped into this is okay? Health benefits for federal employees and certain retirees. Treatment, assessment, and prevention of health-related illnesses. Okay, the CHIPS program, National Institute of Health, who gives out a lot of research grants. The Center for Disease Control is very important. Collects a lot of statistics and everything and and the prevention, keep control of diseases. Like the Center for Disease Control goes, oh, South Carolina, and I think it was New Mexico, we had a bunch of people who do not believe in the measles vaccine. And when I looked at South Carolina, it was closing in on 300 people having the measles. A totally preventable thing, but these people vaccinations, which then put a lot of other kids at risk. And the Food and Drug Administration, their job is to, keep quality control over the food, all these different supplements and everything, so we don't get hurt. It goes, and you see these commercials, not approved, not approved, not approved, or not authorized. That until people make enough complaints, the Food and Drug Administration is not going to look at it. And Medicaid, that comes out of this area. This area, when we talk about health, is discretionary. It doesn't have to be spent. Number three, $880 billion just in interest payments, whether it's to foreign governments, whether it's to different finance banks, other people, retirement, state retirement funds, all these different places. So you're looking at $880 billion. So what you're looking at right now is the federal government spends $880 billion in 2024, 25, and got nothing in return. And this is a mandatory funding. This has to be paid. Just think of it. Most people can't really comprehend $880 billion. Okay? That's about 12 cents, basically on this one, about 12 cents out of every dollar just goes to interest. It's almost like loan sharking. Number 4, mandatory Medicare, $874 billion. basically that entirely of the Medicare program and provides health insurance to Americans 65 or older and people with disabilities. Most of the spending goes towards the provision of medical services and prescription drugs. You know, do you have Medicare Part B, D? A lot of times you have to pay some, and once you fill the gap, then they take over. National defense. Well, let's jump back. So basically, if I look Social Security and I look at Medicare, look about $2.3 trillion that is being paid for Social Security and Medicare. Congress hasn't had the fortitude to go and raise how much comes out of people's check to go in, and it still maintains a very low limit. So millionaires and billionaires, they have to pay very little on their earnings, okay? And of course, a lot of really wealthy people do not get money from earnings. So if we have LeBron James, who makes $40 million, his percentage of paying Social Security is extremely low. I think the high number may went up to like 184,000 this year. So I make 40 million and I only have to pay Social Security on less than 200,000. That is a big question no one wants to show the courage to take that. National defense, discretionary. $874 billion. That was in 24-25. But I bet you most people don't know. The national defense covers the military activities of the Department of Defense. In addition, some funding in this functional area goes towards defense-related activities in other departments, such as Department of Energy, nuclear program, and the FBI. Wait a minute. Why is the Department of Defense funding the FBI? That's a good question. It's easy to hide that. Income security. Bingo. Discretionary. Income security functions itself the program that provides cash and other government assistance to individuals in need, such as those who are unemployed or receiving a very low income, say working at a fast food place for 32 hours a week at $7.25 an hour in the state of New Hampshire. And you better hope you don't have children because you may not have a place to live because there's a long backup into subsidized housing. This also, the unemployment insurance, the SNAP program, supplemental security income, because there's people on Social Security, especially a lot of women who couldn't work, and now they're getting Social Security checks of $300-400 if they're lucky, or their husbands worked at very low wages, and so they go over, and now maybe $700-800 a month. You can't live really much on $700-800 a month. Okay. Temporary assistance for needy family, certain retirement programs other than Social Security, Black Lung Railroad, housing assistance. In addition, refundable tax credits, which are refundable tax credit payments that exceed taxes owed, fall into this budget function. Wait a minute, refundable tax credits, okay, if I'm low income, I'm living in subsidized housing, I have 2 children, and I rate a $5,000 child tax credit, but I don't pay any taxes. I don't even have to file taxes, but I still rate the $5,000. Where does that money come from? It comes from the income security. Okay. Number 7. The Veterans Benefit and Services. $326 billion. Some of it is mandatory. Disability payments are mandatory. The other ones are discretionary, like the healthcare part. And so you could go in and say, wait a minute, there are over 9 million veterans who are receiving health care through the VA. And over half of them do not have a service-connected disability. And a lot of them are allowed in because they have low income. If their income is low enough, they don't have to pay anything. Everything is free. If their income is a little bit over the threshold, then they have to pay co-pays. And you'd go, why would the government allow this to happen? It wasn't until about 1996 that everything was changed. Well, first the government allowed it to happen because there were so few service-connected veterans that they were going to have to close down a lot of VA places. So we couldn't have that. But you always got to look at what the bean counters do. And they're going, wait a minute, it is cheaper to the federal government for them to be taken care of by the VA than these veterans who are non-service connected being taken care of by Medicare. So last time I looked, it was about a 30% cheaper to have the veterans use the VA. And so it's not really out of the goodness of their heart. Other part is the VA has to look at their disability system. They were going for a while. Anybody who had sleep apnea and can prove it was service connected would automatically get a 50% rating. But if you had sleep apnea and the VA gave you all the equipment, you slept really well, you get up and you went to work. So how did sleep apnea affect your ability to work at a meaningful job? Okay, pretty close to 2 million veterans get $180 a month for noises in their ears. And yeah, a lot of people have noises in their ears. You may get, 20%, which is pretty close to $360, $370 a month for an unstable, instable ankle or an unstable knee. Some people I've had get 50% over $1,000 a month for plantar fasciitis, but they go to the doctor podiatrist and get implant there to go in the shoe, and it doesn't bother them. So that number is going up drastically. And so when you look at that, so if you look at 326 for veterans benefits and services and 874 billion for national defense, so National Department of Defense and the VA, $1.2 trillion. Okay. And that's the one. I personally look at this thing. If we have over 9 million veterans using the VA, and not all the veterans who are service connected use the VA, and there's only 18 million veterans later, and they're building more and more clinics, and they're building more and more hospitals and upgrading. In about 10 to 15 years, we're not going to have that many veterans. We don't have 3 million people on active duty anymore. We only have 1.4 million. So if I'm still around then, I would not be surprised the VA will be wounded down, and the VA healthcare system will be the start of a national healthcare system. Because you got to use all the buildings, you got to use the operating rooms, you got to use all this stuff. And what is the way to do it? National healthcare system. Because as you see with Medicare, basically at $900 billion, it's not sustainable. Number 8, at $306 billion, totally discretionary. Education, training, employment, and social services. Includes funding for the Department of Education K-12, social service program administered by various agencies to educate and train workers. It also includes the Library of Congress and certain research and cultural institutions such as the National Endowment for the Art and the Smithsonian Group of Museums. Transportation. Discretionary. The transportation function includes spending on highways, public transfer, the Transfer Security Administration, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration, and most of the Coast Guard. Department of Transportation, that's where the Coast Guard is. Number 10, community and regional development, $85 billion. The community and regional development supports both facilities and fiscal infrastructure, includes grants and programs to encourage urban development, grants to develop depressed areas and disaster relief, and insurance in communities that are recovering from national disasters. Okay, now you know where the FEMA money comes from, and now you, wow, hurricane wiped out all those places in North Carolina. Well, who's going to pay for, who's going to give them insurance? And if they can't get insurance, if they can, how are they going to afford it? So they would go through the federal government. So those are the top 10 of where the money goes. These 10 items make up 97% of the federal budget. In fiscal year 2024, the federal government spent $6.8 trillion. Okay? National defense, 13 cents out of every dollar went to national defense. 13 cents out of every dollar went to Medicare. 5% transportation was only 2%. And veterans benefits and service was 5%. And in fiscal year 2025, discretionary funding outlays were $1.87 trillion. That's discretionary outlet. 48 cents out of that discretionary fund went to the Department of Defense, and 52% went to the rest of the country. Of those, for example, of the mandatory outlays, which was $4.7 trillion, veterans benefits were 6%. Federal civilian and military retirement was 5%. Medicaid, 16%. Mandatory funding, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid accounts for more than 75% of the mandatory funding. Just those three, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, 75%, more than 75% of the mandatory funding. That doesn't leave very much. In fiscal year 2025, okay, in 24 they spent 6.8 trillion. In 25 they spent $7 trillion. Social Security, 22% of the total budget went to Social Security. 14% went to Medicare. Defense discretionary, 13%. Medicaid, 10%. Other mandatory, 13%. Non-defense discretionary. So, bingo, when you go and look at this, only 14, you take out the defense, only 14% or 14 cents on a dollar is discretionary. Just think of it. For every dollar that we pay in taxes, you can say only 14% affects our quality of life. That can pay for national parks, pay for roads, pay for airports, a whole bunch of things. Pay for beaches, pay for environmental stuff. And in 2025, when we paid our taxes, 59%, 59 cents of that dollar went to mandatory funding. Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, interest on the debt. 14 cents of every dollar that we paid went to the debt, interest on the debt. If you have a credit card, say you got a Capital One credit card, and say Capital One says, yeah, we're jacking up the interest by 2% because that's what the cost is. You have a balance of $4,000. Okay, this is the minimum payment that we expect from you. Okay? But if you pay the minimum payment, it's only going to take you 18 years to pay off that $4,000. And you may have to pay $10,000. You may pay more in interest than you do in principal. But if you pay more than we ask you, you can pay it off in 3 years. And the interest goes down drastically. Because we play a trick on you. Every month, your payment's $100. Okay, this one, we will give you $70 on your principal, and we'll keep $30 for interest. But you know what? We're going to reduce your minimum payment to $98. So every month, we're reducing your minimum payment. Not to help you out, but to make sure we keep you on the interest gravy train. So you would think our PhDs, our economists, all the wise people up in the government would go and say, maybe we should kind of work at running a surplus so we can pay down some of the debt so we don't have to pay as much interest. Okay. From September to March 31st, the federal government borrowed $1.2 trillion. That's it. $1.2 trillion. And we haven't even got the war costs and other things in that yet. But $1.2 trillion. Okay. Not only was that $1.2 trillion added onto the debt. Yep. That's total right onto the debt. And guess what? Since we didn't pay any down and we're just refinancing, Chase says, hey, Kris, you got $4,000 on Capital One and they're charging you 30%. Switch over to me. You won't have to pay interest for a year, or you may only have to pay 3% interest for a year, and then I'll go up to 30% like Capital One. And why is Chase doing that? Because they know the chances of you doing that is really slim. And since you might be paying $1,500 less a year in interest, you may put charges on your new Chase card. And so the United States paid $900 billion in interest and never reduced the balance. That's called financial disaster. And a lot of us know you got to reduce your balance of your debt. You can't just pay interest. People love it because they get an interest check. Hey, you know what? If you're stupid to keep putting more money on, I'll buy some of your bonds and, oh, since you're really hurting, I know this bond that I'm selling back to you because you want to buy it back and it was only 2.5%. I'll buy a replacement bond, but I want 4.5%. Government says, well, yeah, I need that because I need to cash into this bond so I can pay the interest. Okay, hey, you know what? I've got the cash, you got the debt. I don't need you, and you need me. And I will determine how much interest that I want. And if you don't give me the interest I want, I'll walk away and find someone else. And it's kind of going, well, you know, why would you want to buy Japanese bonds? Only give it 2.5%. Yeah. German, maybe 2.75. Yeah. Okay. I'll pay you 4.5. Okay. You got a deal. And now I know I'm going to make a lot of money. And you know what? The Japanese, the Germans, the Chinese, it seems like all these people are giving low money on their bonds, buying American bonds. And I go, So if I sell Germany, if I sell $10 billion worth of my government bonds at 2.75%. So I have $10 billion. And I go across the pond and buy $10 billion of American bonds at 4.5%. Oh, so America is covering my 2.75% on my bonds. Ew. And that leaves me 1.75% profit. So I now have money to pay off my debt. And I'm using American money interest to pay off my debt because America debt is growing and growing and they have no choice but to pay extra money. And the growing debt is caused by a structural mismatch between spending and revenue. And from 1996 to 2001, we were paying down our debt. We were still quoting the debt, but our budget minus interest payments was running a surplus. But the banks didn't like that. The Fed didn't like that Greenspan because if they're paying down that, the banks don't make money. And U.S. bonds are extremely safe, guaranteed money. And so we shot way up during COVID. And we got the gap, and the gap really hasn't come down. And actually, the gap between what we're spending and what we're getting in is getting bigger. And it's just that when you go and look at it, by 2033, they expect the interest rate to be about $1.8 trillion. Just think of that. $1.8 trillion. Where's that money going to come from? I don't know. And the one, what I do with that one, I got it right here. I should label these pages. And so for people who want to take the time and look at Mr. Trump's 26-27 federal budget. $7.3 trillion, up $300 billion. And you go, oh, but wait a minute. His proposal is going to bring the defense up to $1.5 trillion. Wait a minute, that's a $500 billion more. Social Security is going to go up to 1.8 trillion. It's of course they always lie. It says that the economy is going to grow by 3%, full employment, all this other kind of stuff. So then they'll say, because of that, we're going to get all this tax revenue come in, so the debt really won't be that bad. Yes, it will. Where's that money coming from? He's talking about $300 billion more, but he wants to increase the defense budget. 500 trillion, Social Security, 500 billion, Social Security's going up, Medicare is going up, and those are mandatory. VA disabilities going up. So we could be looking at maybe $700 billion as an increase. So maybe like $400 billion more. But even with the $300 billion and then the $500 billion, that's a shortfall of $200 billion. And the goal is to cut non-defense discretionary funding by 10%. About 75 to 80 billion dollars. 75 to 80 billion dollars doesn't seem much out of a $7.3 trillion budget, except where it comes from. Okay? How does it affect Keene? Well, every year we get a grant to replace police body cameras. Wants to do away with that, zero it out. So body cameras are going to have to be paid by the local taxpayer. Okay, the community involvement in prevention to help kids at risk and other people. We get a grant. I think we got $6,000-7,000. You know, it's not a lot, but wants to do away with that. Community block grants. Do we use community block grants? Yes. We use community block grants on the old Roosevelt School, which we're turning into apartments. We use community block grants. These go up to $500,000 for Marlborough Street to build more houses. We've used community block grants for an awful lot of things. We use community block grants to help build the Lane, upgrade the Lane Hotel, and to build the Marriott. Wants to do away with them. Funding for environment, grants for environment. Nah, we don't need environment, all that stuff. Nah, we just don't need it. But, really kind of like downtown Keene is in a flood zone and we would like to be able to do it. But we can't afford a lot of things. Okay? Another one. The federal and state revolving fund. We'll do water projects or sewer projects. Instead of going on the out of market and get a higher price, we go through this the revolving fund and we get a loan out of there and then we pay them back and then someone else gets it. So basically it's about $2.5 billion and a lot goes to the states. And they get to do that to help communities, smaller communities and stuff, to be able to do necessary stuff. So, and then a lot of money will also come out of the education. Money for K through 12 education. If you really want to know the amount of grants and everything that we get, you should look at the Keene School District budget. You should look at how much is raised by taxes, local taxes, and how much it comes out. That $82 million budget is not all local taxes, okay? But as they cut these things out, the county government, the city government, the school board, then they also want to cut out work-study programs at the college. When I went to college, I didn't have much money, but I got to work 15 hours a week at work-study, which gave me an opportunity to have some money. But he wants to do away with that. So it could cost the college students, or I can't go to the college because I can't afford it. And part of sometimes with the financial aid package from the college is work-study income. So if it goes and says, you know what, we're going to cut some Title I programs and Title II programs and Title VI programs, and so we're going to give Keene $1.5 million less. Okay. The city can't afford, the school district can't afford $1.5 million more in taxes, so they're going to have to decide which programs they're going to have to do without or a combination. The city can't, it loses block grants, and so where they're going to get funding to increase housing in Keene. All those. And part of it, it's discretionary for the federal government to go out and say, you know what? we're going to give grants for people that are at risk of being homeless, that are really poor, they can't feed themselves. And so what happens there? You know what? State of New Hampshire, each city is responsible for their own homeless population. Then we get back to what was before. The cities force out, these small towns force out their homeless and low income to bigger cities because they don't want to see their taxes going up. It's like, ooh, what the heck is going on? So if we do not look at this, people will not know what's happening to them until it's too late. Not too long ago, we were at 37 trillion, 38 trillion. We're at 39 trillion. At the cost of the war, we don't know how long it's going to go, how's it going to cost, but it's costing. Every day, all our ships are out at sea, airplanes flying over the place, cha-ching, 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 and that's money we don't have. We are in debt because we have spent 20 years of war. In 2019, former President Carter told then President Trump, he says, you know, China has not been in a war since 1979. Stop and think how many wars and how many trillions of dollars America has spent since 1979. China buys our debt and makes money off our debt while we keep selling bonds to help fund wars. And so this tax day, April 15th, 2026. And unfortunately, there's no doubt in my mind, April 15th, 2027 is not going to be better.